Welcome to Fiscal Matters. My name is Komoto, and this is a podcast by the Financial and Fiscal Commission. I am joined today by Sabelo, who is the senior researcher here at FFC, and we will be talking about learner transport. Welcome, Sabelo.
Good day and thank you very much.
Sabelo, we all know that basic education is a right that is enshrined in the Constitution of South Africa. It is the responsibility of government to ensure that this right is realized, like providing learner transport to learners who need transport. However, there have been multiple incidents whereby each and every year during the beginning of the school year, we hear of accident or learners not being able to get onto learner transport, not being able to make it to school, learners even losing their lives in transport provided by the government. Now, you embarked on this research on behalf of the FFC. Can you please tell us why the FFC saw it necessary to have this kind of research in your annual submissions to government?
Okay, Komoso, yes, exactly as you have just said, one of the biggest challenges within learner transport is the high level of accidents, as you have said. Each year and every year you'll read anywhere, there are reports everywhere about learners being unable to reach schools, learners involved in accidents because of cars that they were being transported with to schools, learners unable to go to school. That's the very first reason why the Commission decided to embark in this research. And secondly, you've just said that everyone has a right to basic education. So that right needs to be tracked from time to time. So to determine how government is doing with respect to making sure that that right is realized and is attained by learners. And thirdly, everyone knows, or in economics we know, that education is key to alleviate some of the social and economic challenges such as unemployment, high level of inequalities and poverty. Then if you invest in education, then you are likely as a nation to attain or to deal with such challenges. Then it's important then to track if there are any hindrances for learners to attain such education. And lastly, we at FFC work with key stakeholders like provinces, local governments, and other stakeholders. It came out in one of our engagements with provinces that this is one of the burning issues that provinces are facing. Then it was as a response again to the outcry for provinces on this learner transport to say, just help us here to understand what challenges are and how can we employ learner transport. Then we are assisting those provinces. Hence we undertook this study.
Speaking of provinces, it is to my understanding that they are the ones who are responsible for developing policies for the, learner transport. Can you tell us who's responsible for implementing the program, and do all provinces have policies for learner transport? And also, are these policies consistent in terms of eligibility criteria for students participating in the learner transport program?
Yes, a function of education cuts across between provinces and the national departments. That will be, for example, at the national level, you will have your National Department of Transport, which will be responsible for transport issues and transport policy issues, such as compliance and the like. And on the other side, you have your Department of Basic Education at national level, which plays a role again in education. Similarly, their counterparts at the provincial level, you have a Provincial Department of Education, which implements the education, and then you have your Provincial Department of Transport, which again makes sure that there are regulations that should be followed and complied with when providing learner transport. So all those departments, they do play a role. But in South Africa currently, you'll find that different provinces, they use different departments. Some provinces are using Department of Transport, that is Provincial Department of Transport, to implement the program. and some provinces are using the Department of Basic Education and Provincial to implement the program. Then now you can see from what I've just said that there's that difference. Then now that would for sure have impact on the accountability. Now who accounts for this? If this thing doesn't happen, who accounts? And again, the coordination issues will be there. Yes, provinces, they do have, almost all of them, they do have transport or learner transport policies. But with respect to the consistency, I think all 8 out of 9, they are using, in terms of eligibility now, criteria to say who's eligible, who's not eligible. So 9 provinces, they all have learner transport policies, but 8 of those 9, they are using a 5 kilometers as a determination whether one qualifies. If one has to travel more than 5 kilometers, and then he qualifies to benefit from the program. But the exception is KZN, KwaZulu-Natal. KZN is using 4 kilometers, which is less than the kilometers that are being used by other provinces. And that's the difference, where the difference is in terms of implementation of these eligibility criteria.
So comparing KZN with these other 8 provinces, which one would you say is the better option? The KZN model or the other 8?
I wouldn't say which one makes sense of those policies, but I think it differs depending on the circumstances faced by provinces. For example, you wouldn't expect, as you are sitting here, you know that some provinces, for example, if you have to access to go to a school, then you must cross big rivers, and there are no bridges. Then again, there are forests maybe that a child must walk through before he or she reaches the school. All those are challenges that should be factored into the program to determine whether one would say KZN case makes sense vis-a-vis other provinces. But I think those are things that should play a role. And again, it will have an impact on the affordability for sure, because if KZN kilometers for eligibility are less than other provinces, then the demand in KZN will be reported as a higher, because now the eligibility criteria differs compared to other provinces. I think those are the challenges that we will face. But we can't say for sure that this policy for this province is better than this one. It depends on the circumstances.
Now, from the FFC's research, it shows that there's a significant increase in demand for learner transport over the years. So can you just paint a picture for us, the magnitude, the level of magnitude in rise of this demand of learner transportation? And also, can you highlight the main factors that contributes to the increase, if there is increase, as research has shown?
Yes. To respond to your question, I think first it's important to mention that, as we have spoken about Department of Transport and Department of Basic Education, then these 2 departments, they do report the demand. But it's surprising that in most cases you find that the demand reported by Department of Transport differs by the demand reported by Department of Basic Education.
Why is that?
I don't know where that is coming from, because you understand how important is understanding of the demand, because how do you begin to plan if you don't understand the demand? For example, to take 2015, the data from Department of Basic Education shows that demand was around 516,000, and whereas the one that was reported by Department of Transport was around 503,000. You could see that there's a significant difference. Then you wonder where it's coming from. Then it's important that has to be addressed first. To understand that demand is important, so that you can have plans and budget to meet that demand. To answer your question, yes, there's been a significant increase in the demand for learner transport. For example, I think in 2015, the demand was about 516,000. Whereas if you look at recently in 2023, that demand has increased to be over 900,000. That makes about over 75% increase in the demand for learner transport. As with respect to the key drivers for that, I think we need to understand or to differentiate between the two. There are those provinces that we categorize them as predominantly urban and the ones that are predominantly rural areas. Why is this important? Is because key drivers, they differ. For example, your KZN is mostly rural, your Eastern Cape is mostly rural. Then because of the program that the government embarked on of school rationalization, then those provinces, they found themselves in a position where some of their schools were deemed to be unviable. Therefore, a decision was taken to shut them down or to close them. That means that a school that was nearby to some households, now the nearest school was even further kilometers away. Then that resulted to the increased demand for learner transport. Whereas if you think of provinces like Gauteng, which is, I think key drivers are around the migration patterns, because you find a lot of people migrating from rural areas to urban areas, increasing the demand because the schools were not meant to accommodate all those learners. But again, over and above that, there's growth in these provinces, like in Gauteng, and you'll see that there are some human settlements developments or projects that they do okay, or they are common in urban provinces. Then now, if a school is not there, there's housing development elsewhere, and there's no school which is close by, then for sure all those learners who will be residing in that new development will have to be transported to the nearest school. Then the demand comes from that with respect to the urban.
You say the increase is over 70%. There's a 70%.
Yes, in 8 years. Yeah.
That is very significant.
Yes.
Now, is government able to accommodate or meet this demand?
Given all the competing needs, the government has to address social, economic, etc., and different departments, different areas, such as your housing, your roads, and vis-a-vis the fiscal, the ability of government to raise revenue to make sure that all of these needs are being financed. Then there's no way the government can catch up with such an increasing demand at such a high rate, particularly from the financial point of view. Then now you find that as you do the analysis, you will see that the gap between the demand and the supply is widening. It's widening, and you find a lot of people or a lot of learners who do qualify according to the policies, who do qualify to benefit from this program of learner transport, but they are in the waiting list. They don't actually benefit because of limited resources from the government side. And that number, that gap is widening year in and year out. The way it is now is not the way it was in 2015. The government is unable to meet that demand.
So Sabelo, you say that there's fiscal constraints and that government is unable to meet this demand. What is the role of society in general? The role of society, be it teachers, be it parents, be it community leaders, what is their role in making sure that this right is realized? Because we can't just put it on government to take our kids to school. It is also our responsibility, right? So what is the role of society, particularly parents and community leaders? What is their role here?
In fact, I think from the beginning, if you take your child to school, your intention, or if you have resources, then you'd know that you'll either, if the school is nearby, you'll just walk your kid, or just accompany, if the kid is young, you'll just accompany her or accompany him to school. But now, because of the distance, the school is further down, is far, then you are unable even to walk with your kid. Secondly, if maybe you do have a car, you'll drive your kid and drop your kid before you go to work. Then I think some parents, they do that, who have cars. They drive their learners, drop them at schools, and then when they come back again, they pick them up. And some, they do organize themselves and to form a group, and then maybe they will speak to someone who has a bakkie to load kids to school. But that is not an ideal situation, because these bakkies are not roadworthy.
Yeah.
And the way these kids, they sit, you can see that they are overcrowded. But they do try, the ones that they do, the ones that have some resources. But here, in most cases, we're talking about parents who are from deep rural areas, parents who are indigent themselves, who are dependent on government grants, who can't afford. Then those who can't afford, then they rely much on the program of the government for learner transport. But the ones that they do, they try, the ones that have some resources.
What does the FFC recommend in this regard?
No, in fact, I think two key things would be for the all Provincial Department of Education to undertake research and data collection and identify where higher demand is, the areas of higher demand, and identify those as hotspots, so that when government plans to build new schools, such hotspots or that demand would be considered, would prioritized. Those areas with higher demand prioritized when government builds new schools. I think that could reduce, at least to a certain extent, the demand for learner transport. And secondly, there's so many departments that are involved in the delivery of infrastructure. We talk about the Department of Human Settlements, roads and transport. We talk about the education. All of them, they do have plans. But in some instances, their plans, they are not aligned. They don't speak to each other. You find the Department of Human Settlements building houses somewhere, and there's no coordination with Department of Education to ensure that maybe there'll be a school which will
Close by.
which will close by to that new development. Then if these departments, infrastructure departments, could just come together and align their infrastructure development plans, at least the demand could be reduced to a certain extent. I think that will be the way to go.
All right, Sabina, thank you so much for your time in joining us here on Fiscal Matters.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you very much.